I'm 88. I spent 60 years being nice. My last years will be honest. Constance Elroy, 88 years old. At 86, sitting at my own dinner table, surrounded by people who love me, I realized I had no idea what I actually thought. My son was asking my opinion. I opened my mouth and something warm and useless came out. Not an opinion, a habit. I have been doing that for 60 years. I found a journal I kept in my 30s. A woman inside it I did not recognize. She knew exactly what she thought. She wrote it down without apology. I closed the journal in 1974, and I did not pick it up again. And I spent the next 50 years making her disappear. At 86 years old, sitting at my own dinner table, surrounded by people who love me, I realized I had no idea what I actually thought. Not about the topic they were discussing. One of my sons was explaining a decision he'd made about his job, asking the table for opinions, looking at me specifically the way children look at mothers when they want confirmation. And I opened my mouth, and I heard myself say something warm and measured and entirely useless. And I thought, where did that come from? Not from an opinion, from a habit. The habit of 60 years of translating whatever I actually thought into whatever would land most softly, most helpfully, most pleasantly. And doing it so automatically that by the time the words came out, I had already forgotten what the original signal was. I sat there and I thought, I don't know what I think. Not because I'm old, because I trained myself over 6 decades not to find out. That is where this starts. Not with the crisis, with the dinner table and a missing opinion and the specific, cold recognition that I had done this to myself. I was born in 1936 in Decatur, Illinois, into a family where niceness was not a personality trait, but a survival strategy. My mother was nice. Her mother was nice. The women around me were nice the way load-bearing walls are load-bearing, not decoratively, but structurally, because the alternative had consequences none of them cared to test. You smiled. You accommodated. You made the room comfortable for everyone else, and you found, if you were careful and quiet, small corners of your own life where you could exist without performing. I became an elementary school principal. 31 years. I was good at it. Genuinely good, not just performing goodness, because I believed in the work and I was organized and I cared about the children and the teachers, and I had a specific talent for making difficult situations feel manageable. Parents trusted me. Teachers came to me with problems. I was, in every professional setting, the person who held things together. And I brought all of that home. I organized the family the way I organized the school. I managed the emotions in the room the way I managed a difficult parent meeting, with warmth, with patience, with the specific skill of making everyone feel heard while quietly steering toward whatever outcome caused the least disruption. My husband Edward called me the most competent person he had ever met. He meant it as a compliment. I received it as one. It took me 30 more years to understand what competence had cost. Thanksgiving, 1987. I want you to understand this day not because it was unusual, but because it was completely, thoroughly ordinary, which is the point. I had spent 4 hours cooking a meal I did not want to cook. Not because anyone had forced me, because I had said when the holiday came up in October, We'll have it here, automatically, reflexively, because having it here meant I could control the food and the timing and the temperature of the room and whether the potatoes were right. And controlling those things was how I kept the anxiety of the day at a manageable level. I had invited 14 people. I had made everything from scratch. I had set the table the night before. At 4 in the afternoon, surrounded by family eating food I had made, I said to someone, I cannot remember who, I love having everyone here. This is my favorite day. I meant none of it. Not one word. I was exhausted. I wanted everyone to leave. I had a headache that had been building since 11 in the morning, and I had taken 2 aspirin and continued basting the turkey. And I had not told a single person that I was not having a good time, because telling them would have meant managing their response to the information, which would have required more energy than simply continuing to perform. After dinner, I cleaned up alone. Not because no one offered. They offered. I said, please, go sit down. I've got this. I always had it. That was the whole problem. The seed was earlier than Thanksgiving, 1987. The seed was so small, I can only see it now, from 88, looking back down the line of all the choices it generated. I was in my late 20s. A colleague at school, another teacher, a woman I liked, asked me what I thought about something the principal had decided, a policy change. It was a bad decision, and I knew it was a bad decision, and I had thoughts about it that were clear and specific and grounded in 5 years of classroom experience. I said, I'm sure he has his reasons. These things are complicated. She nodded. The conversation moved on, and I sat with the opinion I had not expressed, and I felt, not relief exactly, but something that felt like relief. The particular comfort of not having made the room uncomfortable, of not having been the person who said the difficult thing, of having kept the surface smooth. I chose that feeling. Again and again, for 60 years, I chose it. Not because I was weak, because I was trained, and because the training worked. And because every time I chose the smooth surface, I was rewarded with the warmth of being easy to be around. And that warmth felt for a very long time like enough. Loretta Vance married my brother in 1963 and never once assimilated into our family's culture of polite performance. She disagreed at dinner. She said when she was tired. She declined invitations she didn't want to accept and did not manufacture an excuse. She simply said, I don't think I'll come to that one, and left the silence where it fell without rushing to fill it. My family found her difficult. I found her exhausting and spent 20 years of Sunday dinners quietly, privately, envying her in a way I would not have admitted to anyone. She didn't manage anyone's feelings. She just had her own and expressed them and let other people manage theirs. It looked from inside my very well-managed life like recklessness, like she was missing some essential social skill. I understand now that she had it and I didn't. She could locate what she thought and say it. I had spent 30 years by that point converting my thoughts into more palatable versions before they reached my mouth. And the conversion had gotten so automatic that I had lost track of where the original was stored. I kept a journal from 1971 to 1974. 3 years. Small brown book. Entries maybe twice a week, written late at night after Edward was asleep, and the house was quiet enough that I could think without managing the thinking. I found it in 2019, going through boxes after Edward died. I sat on the floor of the closet and read the whole thing in one sitting. The woman in that journal was a stranger. Not because she was dramatic, she wasn't. Not because the entries were full of secrets or confessions, but because she had opinions, specific, unmanaged, unedited opinions about things, about people who disappointed her, about decisions that frustrated her, about what she wanted and what she resented, and what she found funny in a sharp, ungenerous way that I had not permitted myself in decades. She disagreed with things. She was irritated by people. She wanted things she had not told anyone she wanted. I stopped keeping the journal in 1974. I know exactly why. I read an entry back to myself and felt, with the jolt of something close to shame, that the woman writing was not the woman I was presenting to the world. And the gap between them frightened me. Not because the journal woman was bad, because she was real. And real felt dangerous. And I had already decided, without quite deciding, that the presented version was safer. I chose the presented version. I closed the journal. I put the pen down, and I did not pick it up again. And I spent the next 45 years making sure the woman inside matched the woman outside by slowly, quietly flattening the inside until the gap was gone. That is the fact. The interior was this. I told myself I was growing up, that the journal was the self-indulgence of a young woman, and that maturity meant putting other people first, that being needed was a form of love, that the competence and warmth and manageability I offered the world was not a performance, but a contribution. I built an entire moral architecture around the choice I had made, and I lived in it for 50 years. And it was comfortable, and it was coherent, and it was, at the foundation, a way of never having to be accountable to myself again. The detail I cannot shake. The smell of that closet in 2019. Cedar and old paper, and the specific dust of things that have been undisturbed for a long time. Sitting on the floor with the journal in my lap, the sound of the house completely quiet around me, reading a woman who knew what she thought and wrote it down, and feeling something that I can only describe as mourning, not for Edward, for her. Here is what nice costs specifically and in order. It costs me anger. Not the existence of anger. I felt it, quietly, in the ways that people who don't express anger always feel it, which is constantly and sideways. What it cost me was the right to name it. Every time something made me angry, a decision I was not consulted on, a need of mine that was overlooked, a boundary I had not set clearly enough to be respected, I converted it. Anger became helpfulness. Frustration became patience. Resentment became another casserole, another organized family gathering, another, of course, whatever works for you. The anger went somewhere. It always does. It went into the specific tiredness that I wore like weather for 30 years, into the headaches that came and went without explanation, into the occasional flashes of something sharp and cold that I felt in my chest when someone presumed on my time, and I said, of course, and then sat with the thing I had swallowed. It cost me grief. When my mother died in 1989, I organized a funeral. I notified the relatives. I handled the paperwork and the logistics and the reception afterward. And I was, everyone said, extraordinary. I was. I was also not allowed, by the version of myself I had constructed, to fall apart, because falling apart was not something the person I had presented for 30 years did. And I had so thoroughly become that person that I could not find, in the days after my mother died, a way to access the grief that was underneath the competence. I wept once, alone in the car in the parking lot of the grocery store, 3 weeks after the funeral. I gave myself about 6 minutes. Then I went in and bought what was on the list. It cost me being known. This is the thing that is hardest to say plainly, because the people who love me would dispute it. They would say they know me, and in many ways they do. But what they know is the version I curated, the one that is always managing, always warm, always capable, never inconvenient. The one that listens on the phone for 40 minutes and does not mention her own problems because her role in every conversation was to hold, not to be held. Somewhere in the 1990s, I cannot place the exact year, a friend called me to talk through a difficult situation she was in. I listened for 40 minutes. I asked good questions. I offered the kind of presence that I was genuinely skilled at offering, the focused and patient attention that made people feel seen. She said at the end, "Constance, I don't know what I'd do without you." And I said something warm in return, and we hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. I had a problem of my own, something I had been carrying for weeks, something that had no clean solution and that I had not mentioned to anyone, not this friend or anyone else. Because the moment I had been given in the conversation was the listening moment, not the speaking moment, and I had filled it accordingly. I got up and started dinner. I did not call anyone back. I never called anyone back about the things I was carrying. I carried them myself, quietly, and I told myself this was strength. And sometimes it was. And sometimes it was just the habit of a woman who had stopped believing she was allowed to need. Loretta, at 85, is sharp and particular and exactly herself. She has fewer friends than I do. Her relationships with her children are complicated in ways mine are not. She has said difficult things to all of them over the years, and some of those things left marks, and they are still negotiating some of it. She is not universally loved. But when you ask Loretta what she thinks, she tells you what she thinks. And when she tells you she loves you, you know she means it, because she does not say things she doesn't mean. And you have watched her not say them for 50 years. Her love is legible because everything about her is legible. I have been loved generously and for a long time by people who loved a version of me that was carefully maintained. I do not doubt the love. I doubt whether I ever let them close enough to love the rest. I want to be careful about how I say this because I am not angry. I want that to be clear before I say anything else. What I am doing in the last years of my life is not revenge on 60 years of niceness. It is not bitterness. It is not the sharp edge of an old woman who has stopped caring what people think. It is something quieter than that and more deliberate. I am returning to the woman in the brown journal, the one who knew what she thought and wrote it down. The one who was irritated by real things and wanted specific things and felt her feelings at full volume in the privacy of her own chest. and then put it in words. I am 88 years old. I have, at a reasonable estimate, not very much time, and I have decided, in the same deliberate way I made every other decision in my life, but this time for myself, that I am going to spend what remains being honest, not unkind, not ruthless, just honest. There is a difference, and I have known it my whole life and applied it professionally for 30 years, and somehow never managed to apply it to my own existence. At a family dinner in the spring of 2023, one of my children asked my opinion about a decision he had already made. He asked the way children ask, not really wanting an assessment, wanting a ratification. Wanting me to do the thing I had always done, which was to find the generous interpretation and offer it back to him and make the room comfortable. I looked at him across the table. I thought about what I actually believed about the decision, which was that it was a mistake, specifically and for reasons I could articulate. I said, I think it's a mistake. The table went quiet, not hostile, just surprised. A Constance they had not encountered in this context, using this voice. My son blinked. He said, Really? I said, Yes, here's why. And I told him, calmly, clearly, without softening it past the point of usefulness. I said what I thought, and I let the silence that followed exist without rushing to repair it. He did not agree with me. The decision stood. We finished dinner and the conversation moved to other things. And at the end of the evening, he hugged me the way he always does and said he loved me. What had changed was not the outcome. What had changed was that I had been in the room. Not the managed version, me. And the room had held it. The room had been fine. I have been a coward about this for 60 years, and the cowardice was dressed up in the language of kindness. And it was not kindness. It was fear. Fear of being found difficult, of losing the warmth, of discovering that the love people had for me was contingent on the performance. And what I have found in the 3 years since I started telling the truth more often is that the love does not go away. It changes shape. It becomes less comfortable and more real. And real, I have decided, is what I want from whatever time is left. I see it everywhere, in people younger than me. You probably recognize it in yourself. You are on a phone call agreeing to something you don't want to do. You are nodding at a dinner table at something you disagree with. You are writing a message that says, no worries, totally fine, about something that is not fine. And you are doing it because the performance is so practiced by now that it happens before you can intercept it. I am not judging you. I did it for 60 years. I was exceptional at it. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with the answer rather than converting it into something more comfortable. Who in your life knows what you actually think? Not the managed version, not the version that is warm and generous and easy to be around. The version that has opinions and irritations and needs and the specific particular inner life that you have been quietly not showing anyone because showing it felt risky and not showing it felt like consideration. Is there anyone? Because here is what I know from 88 years. The people who love the performance will survive the real thing. They might be startled. They might need a moment. But if the love is real, it will hold. And if it won't hold, then what you have been protecting all this time is not a relationship. It is an arrangement, and you deserve better than an arrangement. Say the thing you have been not saying today, not in a speech, not as a declaration, just in the next conversation where you feel the automatic translation beginning. Stop the translation. Let the original come through. It will feel strange. It will feel like something is breaking. What is breaking is the performance. The person underneath it has been waiting a very long time. Tell me in the comments, what have you been converting into something more palatable? And who do you think would still be there if you stopped?